What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we are going to be talking about a deck that has been quickly climbing the charts, may even be overthrowing Ruby Sapphire as the top competitor when it comes to those big tournaments, and that is going to be Diggy Diggy Hole. If you haven't heard of this deck, I would be surprised if you're playing in any level of tournaments because this deck is everywhere. It is a alternative to Steel Song, playing the same colors while playing a little bit more aggro. We're going to talk about my version of it today. I think the deck list is honestly really good. I think it has a lot of really positive matchups, and we're going to talk about some of the play lines that you may want to take advantage of. Before we jump into that, as always, a big shout out to the Patreons for making the giveaways on the channel possible. If you haven't had a chance to check out the Patreon, now is a great time to do so. We're always getting ready to do new giveaways, and we're going to be adding some new downloadable files there very soon. And if you want to get your hands on an awesome Nerd Cave t-shirt, definitely check out our t-shirt site. Link is also in the description. But without any further ado, let's talk about this Amber Steel Diggy Diggy Hole deck. So the first card we're going to be playing in the 1-drop slot is going to be on a 4-of, and that is going to be Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1, but her questing ability is not what makes her great. What makes her great is her ability to sing like she is a 3-cost card very early in the game, very important to how this deck is going to function. Next up in the 1-cost slot, we have 3 Happy Lively Night, a 1-cost inkable 2/1 stat line questing for 1. He gets evasive during your turn. Honestly, that used to be more important to deal with things like Diablo. Diablo is not seeing as much play, not saying it's seeing no play. So there are still some instances where you're going to want to be able to deal with that Diablo, but more often than not, what he's going to be doing is going to be taking advantage of your 7 Dwarves mine, which we're going to talk about more when we get to it. Rounding out the 1-cost slot for those matchups where you just want to go super aggro right at the beginning, which frankly is a lot of the matchups, unless you know your opponent is going to be on characters with 2 willpower on their first turn. Probably want to go first turn Daisy Duck. If they're doing a lot of 2 willpower characters, if they're looking for that Robin Hood shift line, for instance, you're probably going to want to be on Cinderella instead. But in a lot of games, you're going to want to be on Daisy Duck. Just go really aggressive right at the beginning. She is a 1-cost uninkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2. With whenever this character quests, each opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it is a character, they may put it into their hand. They may still send it to the bottom if they like. And if it is not a character, it's going to go to the bottom of their deck. So great way into those Sapphire Ruby matchups to get rid of a lot of those resources that they're going to be digging for in the late game. However, you may unintentionally run them into more big Sisus or things like that. But, you know, if you're in turn 6-7 against Ruby Sapphire anyway, it's probably not going to go great for you at that point. Next up in the first card in the 2-cost slot, we have 4 Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2-cost uninkable 3/2 stat line questing for 1. Resist +1, really good into the steel matchups, great against the more traditional Steel Song deck lists. And during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you're going to go ahead and gain 2 lore. So a lot of times I've seen instances where your opponent may not necessarily realize that you're going to have the propensity to gain 2 lore from her instead of 1, so they quest out thinking they're going to be able to take the game the next turn. All of a sudden you're challenging with Calhoun, eliminating something, and you're gaining 2 lore from her instead of 1. That can be the difference in closing those games out. Next up in the 2-cost slot, another uninkable and a card I wish I bought a million of before they spiked is Doc Bold Knight, a 2-cost uninkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1. I knew this card was good when it came out, and it just wasn't seeing as much play, and now it's in like every single steel deck because of its ability, Drastic Measures. When you play this character, you may discard your hand and draw 2 cards. However, if you have no hand, you discard nothing and still draw those 2 cards. So developing a 1/3 that quests for 1 and drawing 2 is kind of crazy. Next up in the 2-cost slot, a set 6 card, a card I haven't played a whole lot but can be really good in the right kind of deck, especially if it's something where you're not drawing a ton of cards and creating a lot of new resources, is going to be Lilo Escape Artist, or Zombie Lilo as some people have taken to calling her. She is a 2-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 2, and at the start of your turn, if this card is in your discard, you may play her and she enters play exerted. Really super good. Really great way to keep the pressure on in those matchups where they're removing your field. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we are on 3 Piglet Pooh Pirate Captain, a card I also personally don't tend to play a lot of. I play in a heavily steel meta locally, and some of these cards don't feel as good in that super steely meta. But if you're in a meta with more Ruby Sapphire, more Ruby Amethyst, more things that aren't as steel focused, some of these cards are going to be really good. Lilo becomes a lot better in that matchup. Piglet becomes a lot better in that matchup as a 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line questing for 1. and while you have 2 or more other characters in play, he's going to be questing for an additional 2. So he's potentially questing on 3 going into turn 3. However, he is a real flight risk with that 2 defense as far as getting banished by something before he's able to get value. Next up in the 2-cost slot, we're on 4 Mr. Smee, Bumbling Mate, a 2-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 2. I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. This is still, in my opinion, one of the best cards in the game. 3/3 for 2 that quests for 2 is absolutely bonkers, even with the drawback ability, oh dear, dear, dear. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted and you don't have a captain character in play, it is going to take 1 damage. However, it is quite on curve with Rapunzel, so if you want to fire those Rapunzels down, heal him up with that 2 damage, it can be really good to just get some extra card draw. Now, quite possibly the star of the show for this deck, we do have 4 7 Dwarves Mine, a 2-cost inkable, 2 to move in, 6 willpower, 1 passive lore at the start of each turn. I feel like most people, when these cards come out and they're 2 to move in with locations, they just overlook them immediately. So this card kind of got slept on for a little while. It's a set 5 card that I feel like has really started to shine into set 6 with the during your turn, the first time you move a character here, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. Already can be pretty good. However, if the moved character is a knight, you can deal 2 damage instead. So when you're looking at the Doc and the Happy in this deck, they are going to move for that 2 damage. If you get 2 Dwarf Mines out, you can potentially move them back and forth. It's only going to be once per turn, but if you could potentially have 2 of these down and deal 4 damage every turn, it'd be absolutely crazy, even if you only have a couple characters out to quest in your opponent's face, plus you're gaining the passive lore from 7 Dwarfs Mine every turn. Next up, we're on 4 Pete, Games Referee, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1. When you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn, so it's just going to shut them down on those actions. Also a great option into that Steel Song matchup or into anything where they're going to be trying to play Be Prepared against you. Pete is going to be a great way to stop them from doing that for 1 turn and getting 1 more turn worth of lore. Next up, a card I've been a proponent of for a while that's really starting to see more play in steel decks, and that is going to be John Silver's Ship's Cook, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1. When you play this character, chosen character can't challenge during their next turn, so if they have a character out, particularly one you know they definitely want to be challenging with, John Silver is a great way to shut that down. Whatever big character they're wiping your board with, may it be that Madam Mim Fox or Maui or whatever it is, you just go ahead and prevent them from challenging. Save your characters for an additional turn, and again, much like Pete, he's going to potentially be able to help you close out a game. A card I have seen different counts of, but in pretty much every steel deck I've built in this meta anyway, I am on 4 Lawrence Jealous Manservant. I think this card is really super good. He is a 3-cost inkable 0/4 stat line questing for 2. However, while this character has no damage on him, he gets +4 strength, so he's a 4/4 for 3 that quests for 2. Really super good, essentially for the same reason that Smee is, and because he has a 4 defensive stat line, he can potentially be healed by Rapunzel for 3, which can get you in some sneaky challenges sometimes. Next up in the 3-cost slot, one of the 2 actions in the deck, and that is going to be Let the Storm Rage On, a 3-cost uninkable action song, deal 2 damage to chosen character and draw a card, which is a fantastic combination of things. That's why it costs 3 and it's uninkable. But with something like Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, we're really going to be able to take advantage of Let the Storm Rage on turn 2 to not only get that card draw going, but wipe out initial threats. And that Ballroom Sensation is going to be taking advantage into our next card, which is going to be Strength of a Raging Fire, a 3-cost inkable this time action song. This one has a little bit of a caveat and doesn't draw you a card. It's going to deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. So if you only have that Cinderella Ballroom Sensation in play, not always as exciting. However, if you have a 2 defense character you need to take out, you don't have that Storm Rage on, you're able to develop a second character going into turn 2, then you can go ahead and sing this, potentially dealing 2 damage. It's not the ideal play. You want to potentially save this for when you have a few more characters on the board, but if this is the only thing you have and you need to keep that board clear in the early turns, it's a great option. Next up in the 4-cost slot, and getting towards the end of the deck, is going to be Pluto Guard Dog, a 4-cost inkable 1/5 stat line questing for 1 with Bodyguard, and much like Jealous Manservant Lawrence, he does get +4 strength while he has no damage on him, so he is going to be a 5/5 for 4 with Bodyguard. He does only quest for 1, unlike Lawrence and Smee, so you're not getting that quest for 2 in, but that Bodyguard protecting your field. Again, this deck is all about getting those guys out, questing in, being able to deal damage with them, and then just protecting your field as much as you can. Hence the Bodyguards, the direct removal, the Petes, the Ship's Cook, John Silver's. There's a lot of ways to kind of just protect what your board is trying to do. And the last card in the deck, we're on 4 Rapunzel gifted with healing. I'm sure I'll hear it from everybody in the comments who doesn't have Rapunzels. I don't have Rapunzels. What is a good alternative for Rapunzel? If you're commenting that, I am going to tell you here, so that tells me you did not watch the end of the video, so do not comment that. And that is going to be Julietta Madrigal. She is your most obvious replacement to Rapunzel because she's going to do something similar. However, I can't stress this enough. Rapunzel is a card that can't be easily replaced because Julietta Madrigal just isn't as good. She is a 3-cost inkable, I think 2/3 stat line that heals 2, and lets you draw 1 card. It's decent. She costs 1 less. It's not terrible. If you have no Rapunzels, that's the way to play it. However, if you have Rapunzels, play Rapunzel. Rapunzel is very good as a 4-cost inkable 1/5 stat line questing for 2 with the ability Gleam and Glow. When you play this character, remove up to 3 damage from one of your characters. Draw a card for each damage removed this way. So she's going to be a great way to continue to keep that pressure on. She is also going to be one of your very few card draw options in the deck. You have the 4 Rapunzels, 4 Docks, and 4 Let the Storm Rage on. Nothing else in this deck is letting you draw cards. So Rapunzel, if you can take advantage of her, is really super important. I know they are very expensive, but I've said this once, I'll say it 100 times. If you're somebody who likes to play Amber, Rapunzel is such a staple in the meta. She has been a staple since chapter 1. Short of her getting banned or like rotating out, I don't see this card going down in price. I really just see it continuing to rise in the long term. We're seeing less printing of first chapter. They're focusing now on providing first chapter to places like Japan and China, which is great. Though our cards aren't play legal there, which may potentially hurt our prices a little bit. Their cards are play legal here, so it's a little weird. Doesn't kind of seem balanced. Hopefully Ravensburg will do something about that, but I am rambling. If you want to get your hands on Rapunzels, like I mentioned, Japanese and Chinese cards are playable here. Those singles may be a little bit cheaper. So that is the breakdown on Diggy Diggy Hole. Like I mentioned, I think the deck is really super good. I think it's very effective into a lot of matchups. I think it does potentially have some rough matchups. I think the Ruby Amethyst matchup in particular could be difficult for this deck because you're not super teched for it. But I do think this could beat Ruby Amethyst. I think it could beat Ruby Sapphire. It just depends on the cards you draw and the cards they draw and how well you play the deck. Always remember those play lines. Always remember to think about what your opponent is going to do next. I know so many of you dropped those thumbs up, those likes on the how-to deck building 101 video. We do have a deck building 102 video planned. It's going to be coming very soon, so if you are waiting for that, stick around. If you aren't subscribed to the channel, now's a great time to do so because we're going to have more deck building tips coming. If you want to be able to have a conversation with me more directly, definitely, like I mentioned, check out the Patreon. There is a direct message functionality for all paid Patreons. You can contact me directly. I'm happy to give you any tips that I possibly can on your deck lists. And like I mentioned, we will have a deck list contest coming very soon. So if you haven't thought about a deck list to enter, if you have something original and creative, get ready to enter that deck list contest. If you don't have anything put together already, start thinking about those weird decks. You know, get involved in the contest. It's free to enter. Worst case scenario, you win nothing. Best case scenario, you win something. But that is Amber Steel Diggy Hole. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And when you see those toys, video games, and fancy expensive Rapunzels off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.